The Formula 1 season is over for 2025. It is almost Christmas time, hence why I am in this Captain Holt jumper from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. But this is also the time to reflect on the season we've just had and also look forward to the future. But I'm going to look a bit more into the past this time, because about a year ago I made a video going over a tier list, creating a tier list for the best one-time world champions in Formula 1 history, and there are quite a lot of them. Now, when I made that video, the production quality of the show was not quite what it is today. I made a lot of big mistakes when it came to the editing of it, and having rewatched it ahead of going through this updated version, we've come a long way. We've definitely come a long way. It is fair to say I made a lot of real rookie errors when it came to that video. It was the first video of that type I had done, so you know, you live and learn at the end of the day. Ever since that came out as well, the list has now changed effectively too. We have a new one-time champion in the form of Lando Norris, of course, as he won the Drivers' Championship this year. Now, the cynics may say that, George, you're running out of ideas. You're just doing a remake of an old video, and you might be right when you're saying that. You might have a point there. But also, a third reason why I want to go over this is that there are a couple decisions when it came to the grades that I gave some drivers that I think now were probably either a little generous or a little harsh. There were two in particular that I look back on now, and you know what? I actually agree with some of the comments to an extent, it's fair to say. I think I probably did get those ones wrong. So we're going to go through all of this, guys. The tier list redux for 2025. It's fairly self-explanatory. I've used the standard tier list here, with grades going from S at the top down to D at the bottom. To qualify for the list, you had to have won one world championship in your Formula 1 career. No multiple champions are allowed in this list. The way that I did it last time in terms of what the grades actually correspond to essentially goes like this. At the bottom, we have D. If you get a D grade, you were pretty lucky to win that world championship, in my opinion. As lucky as a one-time champion can be, effectively. Very much a one-hit wonder, for lack of a better term, if you will. C grade means that one world championship is about right. That's about fair. B grade means that you could have won more than one world championship or got close to winning multiple world championships, but either bad luck or just a drop off in performance did ultimately cost you there. A means that you probably should have won multiple world championships, and S means that you definitely should have won multiple world championships, and arguably, had things been different, could have been one of the true elites, the GOATs of the sport. So guys, without further delay, let's get into this. So we're going to go from the first to the most modern, and the first world champion on our list is the first Formula 1 champion, full stop. That being Giuseppe Nino Farina. Farina won his only world championship in Formula 1's inaugural season in 1950. When you think about champions in the 1950s in Formula 1, two names do jump out. Juan Manuel Fangio, who won 5 titles, and Alberto Ascari, who won a pair of them. But Farina beat them both and the rest of the competition to win the inaugural Formula 1 World Championship. Now, he was a tad lucky in a sense, because Juan Manuel Fangio had a few retirements during that campaign, and he only narrowly won the championship ahead of the Argentine. But Farina very much was robbed, arguably, when it came to his best years in motorsport, those probably falling somewhere between the Second World War, where of course Grand Prix racing stopped altogether during the late 30s and the early 40s. So maybe there's a bit of a sympathy vote here and from to an extent, but I do think he was a great driver, and he probably did deserve that one world championship overall. So his grade remains as C, just like it was a year ago. He wasn't the best driver of his era by any stretch of the imagination, but he was a great driver nonetheless, and he was in his mid-40s when he won that title as well. So fair play to you, Farina. Next is a guy that you'll be familiar with if you watched my video going over all of the Formula 1 World Champions from the UK, all 11 of them now, and his name is Mike Hawthorn. Hawthorn became the first British Formula 1 world champion in 1958, beating Sir Stirling Moss to the title. Now you could argue that Hawthorn was a tad lucky when it came to winning the title in 1958, and that is a valid argument. The reason being is that essentially he was disqualified from the Portuguese Grand Prix that year, but his rival Moss actually argued and successfully got him reinstated into that Grand Prix. I believe they accused him of getting a push start. However, his second place was allowed to stand, and at the end of the season that proved to be pivotal because he ended up winning the championship narrowly ahead of Sir Stirling. However, Hawthorn retired after 1958, so he never got a chance to actually defend his title in 1959. Whether he would have done so successfully is up for debate. If he stayed on long enough with Ferrari, he probably would have been able to win the World Championship again in 1961, or certainly been in the mix with the next guy we're going to talk about on the list. So while you could argue that he was a tad lucky in 1958, I do think Hawthorn did just enough to get a C grade on this list. Next up, we're going to move to 1961, where Phil Hill became the first American to win the World Championship, and indeed, to this day, the only American-born Formula 1 World Champion when he won his only title in 1961. Hill was in a season-long battle for the championship with his Ferrari teammate Wolfgang von Trips, and the championship was decided in the most tragic of circumstances at the penultimate round of the Italian Grand Prix. Hill won the race, but Wolfgang von Trips ended up crashing into the crowd, causing several fatalities and tragically himself as well. There was just 1 point between them at the conclusion of this round. Von Trips was ahead of Phil Hill going into this round. Had Von Trips not crashed, there is a very strong case to be made that he probably would have won the World Championship. As it is, we'll never know. But I would certainly argue that Phil Hill was lucky in 1961 to win his only title. Hill was renowned for being the nicest man in motorsport. I'm sure he was quoted as saying that he doesn't enjoy winning because that means that other people have lost. And 61 was his most competitive season by far. He never placed in the top 3 aside from that season. And after 1961, you can tell that his heart wasn't really in Formula 1 anymore. He only raced full-time for a few more seasons after that and was never truly competitive on the same level like he was. So even though he is such a nice guy, even though he is well renowned for it, I do have a lot of respect for him, I do have to put him in the D category. I would stand by the fact that I think he was probably a bit lucky to win in 61. Next, let's talk about another Brit, a very unique Brit when it comes to winning the World Championship in Formula 1, John Surtees. Surtees is the only man to have won the World Championships in Formula 1 and also MotoGP as well. He's the only man to win championships on 2 and 4 wheels. A lot of people tried before him and tried after him, but he's the only man who ever managed it, winning the world title in 1964. If this was a measure of driving ability in all series, then Surtees would certainly go in the S tier. To do that is an unbelievable achievement. However, this list is exclusively Formula 1. Achievements in other series, sadly for Surtees, do not count for anything here. Surtees was a brilliant driver though in Formula 1, that cannot be underestimated. The cynics might say that he only narrowly won the championship in Mexico, with both Jim Clark and Graham Hill dropping points during that round. However, Graham Hill and Jim Clark are two of the all-time greats of Formula 1, so to beat them in the same season was very impressive. And every time he finished in 1964, he was on the podium. His car wasn't the most reliable, but when it made the finish line, he usually finished near the front. So I don't think he was lucky at all to win in 1964. That would just be downright incorrect in my opinion. Surtees did finish runner-up in the World Championship again in 1966 and had quite a few 4th places as well. Had he stuck with Ferrari for a little longer, he may have got some more success there, you never know. However, he instead chose to focus on Honda, their entry into Formula 1, and later his own team as well, the Surtees team. So if circumstances were a little bit different, and given the fact we know the guy is incredibly talented, I think that Surtees rightfully has to go in at least the B grade category. The next man on the list is the only man from New Zealand to have won the World Championship. The forgotten world champion, as I sometimes call him, because he's a guy that a lot of people these days just aren't aware of. That being Denny Hulme, or as he actually called his name quite regularly, Dennis Hulme. I'm sure I saw an interview where he ended up calling himself that, but he's also known as the Bear, so let's go with that, why not? The original Bear man in Formula 1. The Bear won his only Formula 1 World Championship in just his third season in 1967, beating some of the true greats of the sport at the time, including Sir Jack Brabham, Jim Clark, John Surtees and Graham Hill to the title, although Hill did not have the best time in 67, but that's a story for a different day. The Bear also placed in third place in 1972 and 1968, proving that it wasn't a flash in the pan in winning his title in 1967. He was competitive throughout most of his time in Formula 1, with the exception of 1971 driving for McLaren, and that wasn't his best season in fairness. Now, I gave him a D grade. I gave him the lowest grade available when it came to my list 12 months ago. I'm starting to think that is maybe a little bit harsh, but we are talking about the standards of champions here. So I'm going to stick with my initial grade of D, but I do think that there is definitely a case for the Bear to go into the C category here. It's very much on the border between the two. He'd be like a D plus or a C minus, you know, he'd be around there. Plus, I don't want to leave Phil Hill there by himself at the bottom, you know, I feel that's a little unfair on the guy. So that's what I'm going to go with, Hulme or Hume, whatever you want to call him. Next up, there's no doubt about how you say this guy's name, the 1970 world champion Jochen Rindt. Rindt is the only posthumous world champion, the only guy to have won the world championship after he passed away. He absolutely dominated the 1970 season driving for Lotus, but he too, a bit like Wolfgang von Trips, ended up having a tragic accident at Monza for the Italian Grand Prix. Rindt was always touted as a future world champion, but he just needed to get the right car, and in 1970 Colin Chapman provided him with exactly that. Had Rindt lived, I certainly think he would have been battling it out with the likes of Emerson Fittipaldi and Sir Jackie Stewart for championships in the rest of the 1970s. He was quite young when he passed away as well, only 28, so he had at least another 5 years of his prime there. So I think given his clear, incredible pace, the fact that he easily probably would have been at least a multiple world champion, I think you have to put him in at least the A category. And I think given how impressive he was in 1970 and how we never got to see the best of him, I think he certainly would have been a multiple world champion and could have become one of the true greats of the sport in terms of his achievements. I mean, being a world champion is very impressive, but I think this guy probably would have won 2-3 titles minimum. So I'm going to put him in the very top. I'm going to go all the way to the top. S tier for Jochen Rindt. He's our first entry in that category. Next, let's talk about James Hunt. Oh man, what a character James Hunt was. Such a shame he passed away so young. He of course survived his Formula 1 career, but passed away in his 40s of a sudden heart attack. Back when most people probably knew him more for his commentary in the commentary booth with Murray Walker, forming a legendary partnership there. But before that, he was an incredible champion in 1976, overcoming the great Niki Lauda during that season. Now, again, the cynics will probably argue, well, he was lucky to win in 1976. If Lauda hadn't had his accident at the Nürburgring, then he would have lost the championship. And to be honest, I do agree with that sentiment to an extent. But to overcome Lauda in the circumstances that he did was extremely impressive. That was only his first season in the McLaren, his first time in a top car. Going from Hesketh to that was a massive step up. But it paid off for McLaren. Also, the Hunt haters conveniently leave out the fact that he was very competitive in that Hesketh. He managed to win the 1975 Dutch Grand Prix, holding off who else but Niki Lauda for the victory around Zandvoort. I'll say the same as what I said during my British Champions video as well. Hunt burned bright and hot, but my God, did he have an incredible season in 76, and that has to earn him some good marks from me. Plus, Niki Lauda always said that this guy was an incredible driver and didn't deserve the criticism that he got. He was deserving to be a champion, and what a champion he was. So given all that, given the words of Herr Lauda, I have to put him in at least the B category, James Hunt. Just for that season in 76, it was a monumental effort, and that's something I should have bared in mind when it came to grades for a certain somebody later in the list, but more on him very soon. Next, let's speak about one of the true legends of motorsports, one of the real GOATs of motorsport, that being Mario Andretti, who won his only Formula 1 World Championship in 1978, driving for Lotus. Andretti was the last Lotus World Champion in Formula 1 and had an incredible time in Formula 1, dipping his toe in and out for the likes of Lotus and Ferrari in an incredible storied career. Mario Andretti's longevity in motorsport is something that has to be studied, let's be real here. And it's something that I actually asked him about when I spoke to him, and I'll always mention this when I get a chance. Very much a highlight of my career personally, but when I spoke to him earlier this year, he was absolutely on top form. Do go watch that interview if you somehow missed it when it happened earlier this year. But he basically said that pure love and passion for the sport is how he did it. That is how he stayed in motorsport for so long. Like with Surtees, if this was a measure of their talent overall, in all motorsports, Andretti would comfortably go to the S tier. No problem whatsoever. 100%, no doubt whatsoever. But because it's only Formula 1, that does knock him down a little bit, but not much. I think if Andretti actually focused all of his efforts on Formula 1 and nothing else, no kart, no NASCAR, no endurance racing, nothing like that, just focused all on Formula 1, then he would have been a multiple world champion. I have zero doubt about that whatsoever. So with that in mind, I'm going to put Andretti in the A category. You can certainly make a case for him still to go in the S category, right at the very top there, but I think A is probably about right, although I love you, Mario. I want to put you in the top category, I do, but I think you would probably agree with that assessment as well. At least I like to hope so. Anyway, if you want another chat, Mario, hit me up. Good to talk to you again, man. I'd never turn that down. In 1979, we got to date the first and so far only African Formula 1 world champion, that being Jody Scheckter, or Jody Scheckter, I suppose, would be more accurate there. Scheckter won the championship in 1979, driving for Ferrari, fending off his teammate Gilles Villeneuve, who is well renowned for being one of the best drivers in Formula 1 history. I certainly rate him extremely highly. Of course, that was the highlight of his career. He wouldn't be a one-time world champion if that wasn't the best moment, but there were other great points as well. He was very competitive for the likes of Wolff and Tyrrell before 1979 as well. And he actually won Wolff's first ever race in Formula 1 as well in 1977 in Argentina. And in 77, he was the runner-up in the World Championship. He was also third in 74 and 76, driving for Tyrrell too, when they weren't exactly at the peak of their powers anymore. So despite these days people not really knowing who Scheckter is and not really knowing how good he is, I think he was actually a great driver and could have been a multiple world champion quite comfortably. He also retired after 1980 as well, and you got to think maybe if he stayed on a little bit longer, he could have been world champion, maybe in 82 if he stayed at Ferrari. But we'll never know. Nevertheless, I do know that I'm putting him in the B category for his efforts in 1979. I think he was excellent. And had things played out a little differently, he could have been world champion again. You never know. Next, let's talk about the first Williams Formula 1 world champion, Alan Jones, in 1980. Now, Jones is someone who I have changed my opinion on quite a bit over the years. I didn't used to rate him that highly. I thought in 1980 that was just his one-hit wonder and that was kind of it. But having researched him a little bit more, my opinion on him has become a bit more favourable. He was always competitive in whatever car he was in. Even in his early days in the Shadow, he was winning Grand Prix and doing very well for himself. He also came pretty close to winning the World Championship in 1979 and 1981, either side of his championship in 1980. So that has to get you some respect. Now, he did leave Formula 1 in 1982, but he came back later on for the likes of Arrows and Haas. No, not the new one, a different team Haas from back in the day. And he managed to get some good finishes in that Haas as well in 86. Again, that has to earn you some kind of credit here. I do think one world championship is about right for him. I know a lot of people would probably put him in the D category, but I think he's worthy of a C, to be honest. Now let's talk about the first Finnish champion in Formula 1, Keke Rosberg. Interestingly, he was actually born in Sweden, which is a little fact I didn't know before doing some research for this video a year ago. Keke was a brilliant driver, you know, someone who could basically turn his car on a sixpence and make it actually point the right way at the end of it. Nobody recovered from a spin like Keke did. Now, you could probably argue that Keke Rosberg was a little bit lucky in 1982. The Ferrari drivers suffered a fatal accident and also a career-ending accident for Gilles Villeneuve and Didier Pironi, respectively, during that season. And indeed, Pironi actually finished second in the World Championship when it was all said and done. Keke only got one win during that year. He was the only guy to manage to do that, where they actually just won one race in their season where they won the championship. The other guy being Mike Hawthorn, but that was in a much shorter season. But still, you got to keep your nose clean, and I think that Keke was an excellent driver. I really do rate him highly. I think he was brilliant, to be honest. But the numbers don't lie, and I can't really make a case for him to be higher up the list. I mean, when he got put against the likes of Alain Prost at McLaren, he didn't exactly look too amazing there. I mean, I know he was kind of on the way out at that point, but still, I'm going to put Keke in the C category. I feel like a one-time champion for him was probably about right. He ended up where he was going to be most likely. And then we have to go a good 10 years into the future, to the early 1990s, for our next one-time world champion, Nigel Mansell in 1992. Our Nigel was a fantastic driver back in the day in Formula 1. He easily could have been a multiple world champion in addition to his 1992 championship. Had his tyre not exploded in Adelaide in 1986, he probably would have won the title then and there during that season. And he was also still competitive in the likes of 1987, although he was pretty resoundingly beaten by Nelson Piquet during that season. But the guy's talent was absolutely incredible. Some do question his attitude, thinking that the guy loved to moan and loved to complain, and that hindered him. And I do think there is some truth to that. He definitely loved a whinge, did our Nige. But he was still competitive right at the end of his career. He won the Adelaide Grand Prix in 1994, his final one for Williams. And he also went back-to-back effectively. He won the Formula 1 Championship in 1992, then he won the Kart Championship, what is now IndyCar, in 1993. I know achievements in other sports don't count towards the gradings for this list, but you have to at least acknowledge that is a very unique achievement, to be champion on both sides of the Atlantic at the same time, albeit for a very brief time. Nobody else has done that before or since. And you also have to bear in mind as well that Mansell was competing in the 1980s and 90s when I believe Formula 1 was at its peak in terms of the driver talent. At the very top anyway. Maybe the guys at the bottom aren't as talented as what you get now in Formula 1, but the guys at the top were absolutely incredible. Ayrton Senna, Alain Prost and Nelson Piquet, all 3 or 4 time world champions in the sport at the same time, and you're competing against them for the title? So yes, of course, he had an all-conquering Williams in 1992 to win the championship, but he came close on so many other occasions. So given his talent level, given the fact that, honestly, if he was born into a different era, he probably would have been a 3-time world champion in my opinion, I think he's got to go into the S tier, the very, very top. Some people might put him down in A, and I can see why, I'll be honest, but I'm going to put him in the S tier. Maybe a bit of British bias finally coming in there. It's been a while, hasn't it? Now, one of the most controversial inclusions on my list 12 months ago, the 1996 world champion, Damon Hill. Now, I put Hill into the A category because my reasoning was essentially that you could definitely make a case for him, had things been slightly different, that he would have won the world championship 3 times. Now, that might sound a little outlandish, but there are some circumstances that do lend themselves to this potential theory here. The first being 1994, where there was the collision with Michael Schumacher, which I firmly believe Schumacher did that on purpose, and it crashed Hill out. Had Schumacher been disqualified or get some sort of points penalty, or if Hill hung back and didn't try to overtake Schumacher, things would have been different. And then Hill wins the championship in 94. He also got sacked by Williams after 1996 when he was world champion. If he stayed on for 97, he might have won it again instead of Jacques Villeneuve. Again, we'll never know, but that's definitely a possibility. So that was the 3 championships there, and that's why I put him in the A category. But I understand why people don't exactly rate Damon Hill as highly as others. I do think that A is maybe a little bit high. To put him on the same level as Andretti, yeah, that's a bit much. A lot of people were saying that he should be D category, that he should be C category, that 1 championship was about right. And on the balance of things, I can see why you would say that. But personally, for me, I do think there is a definite case to say that had things just been a little bit different, Hill would have been a multiple champion. So with that in mind, I am going to go kind of in the middle here, sit on the fence a little bit and put him in the B category. I can see why you'd put him in C. I get it, but at the end of the day, I do think he came so close on a few different occasions that he should be in the B category personally. Wasn't perfect by any means, 95 was a poor season for him, but still, he came close on a number of different times, so I'm going to put him in the B category. So there, hopefully that appeases some of you guys. It's probably not. It's probably not. There's going to be loads of rioters in the comments again. I just know it. I just know it. But yeah, his teammate for 96, of course, was Jacques Villeneuve, who was a rookie in the series during that season. And he won the championship himself in 1997, becoming to date the most recent Williams Formula One world champion. Villeneuve was a really good driver. I mean, a lot of people nowadays love to clown on him, say he doesn't know what he's talking about with F1s for his rather sharp opinions. I mean, you know, I get why a lot of people don't like him. I personally don't like listening to him that much. I think he's a bit out there, to be honest, to say the very least, but each to their own. But that's absolutely irrelevant when we're talking about his abilities as a driver. He was the kart world champion before he joined Formula One in 1996, winning that championship in 95. And I think if he stayed with Williams or went to a different top team after 1998, then again his career could have been very different. He went over to BAR Honda, became like a part owner of the team, and it was just a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. I feel like if he stayed at a top team, then he would have been very, like if he went to McLaren, for example, if he went to Ferrari, can you imagine Jacques Villeneuve and Michael Schumacher in the same team? It had never happened, but I'm just saying hypothetically, I think then he'd have a lot more wins under his belt, a lot of people would respect him more. I do think overall, though, that C's probably about right in terms of his talent level. I think that car in 97 was obviously the best, just like Damon Hill in 96, but Villeneuve never came that close to winning the championship after, although he never got in a top car, so it's a tough one to judge. For me, he's a C, borderline B. I don't think there's a lot between Hill and Villeneuve, to be honest, looking at this. But I think C, I'm going to go over there. I think that's probably about right. But I can definitely see why some people would put him higher. I can see why some people would put him lower as well, but I'm going with that. Next, let's go to the noughties, the 2000s, where in 2007, Kimi Raikkonen won his only world championship driving for Ferrari. Raikkonen had got close to the world championship for numerous different seasons while racing for McLaren before this. He was immediately competitive as soon as he went into the McLaren in just his second season in Formula One in 2002. He came close in 2003 to winning the title, losing out in the final race of the season in Suzuka to Michael Schumacher. In 2005, he could well have been world champion that year had the McLaren not been so unreliable. He moved to Ferrari in 2007 and overcame the infighting, squabbling McLaren cars of Fernando Alonso and Sir Lewis Hamilton to win his only title. Even after leaving the sport for a number of years, he came back for Lotus in 2012 and he was competitive straight away. He was third in the championship that year and won a race in his first season back because he knew what he was doing, and you should have left him alone at the Yas Marina circuit in Abu Dhabi. He'd later go back to Ferrari and again was an incredible number 2 for the likes of Sebastian Vettel, very much backing him up in what was ultimately a failed title bid, but still, he was so consistent, running on the podium very, very regularly was Raikkonen, and that was almost into his 40s. So because of his longevity, because he came so close to winning the championship on a number of occasions, and because of the guy's absolutely searing pace, I mean, this guy over one lap when he was younger, peak Raikkonen was absolutely unstoppable. For me, he's got to go in the S tier. He could have easily been a 3-time world champion, and given his talent levels, he probably should have been, to be honest. And another guy who had to wait quite a few seasons to be world champion was Jenson Button, who won the Formula One World Championship driving for Brawn in 2009. It looked as though Button might not have even had a seat on the grid in 2009 thanks to his team at the time, Honda, going out of business thanks to the financial crash. Button was always touted to be a Formula One world champion, and indeed he really showed this in 2004 while he was driving for BAR Honda. He was regularly the best of the rest behind the all-conquering Ferraris of that year. 2006 was his first win at Hungary, and he was very much a wet weather master. Go watch his drive at Canada in 2011 and get back to me if you don't believe me. So if things have been slightly different, I think he could have been world champion more than once. Had McLaren been a bit more competitive in the early 2010s, he could have been world champion. Maybe if he stayed at Williams for longer after 2000, he could have been world champion. They, of course, came close to the likes of Juan Pablo Montoya during that time. Imagine Button and Montoya in the same team. That's a scary prospect in itself. So I don't think it's certain by any means, of course. I mean, it's a hypothetical scenario by its very nature, but I do think Button probably should go into the B category. I think he is on a par with the likes of Surtees and Hunt and Scheckter and Damon Hill. I think that's kind of where he belongs. I think he's a little bit better than the guys below him in the C category, so I'm going to put him there. Oh man, and now Nico Rosberg. Now this was the other one. There were two of them. This was the other one that caused a lot of controversy when it came to my grades. I can't remember whether I put Nico Rosberg. I think I put him in the C category because my reasoning was that although he did very well in 2016, he was lucky to win the championship during that year. And people absolutely descended on me. They absolutely went for me in the comments saying British bias, the disrespect is crazy, all this sort of stuff, right? And you know what? Yeah, I was wrong on that one. I will admit I was way too harsh on Nico when it came to that. Because, you know, you got to look at the guy's career, right? He started at Williams in 06, did very well there, was very competitive. You know, he competed very well against the much more experienced guys like Mark Webber at the team at the time. He was competitive with Sir Lewis all the way up the junior categories. He went to Mercedes in 2010 and he was competitive against Michael Schumacher, albeit a Schumacher who was not at the peak of his powers, but still at the time the most successful driver in the history of the sport. Still one of only two guys to have won the title 7 times. And then he gets paired with Sir Lewis, the only guy to come up against Lewis Hamilton and beat him in equal machinery, apart from Charles Leclerc, who's done it now, of course, as well. And George Russell, actually, for that matter, too. But, you know, this was peak Hamilton back then. You know, this was Hamilton at the peak of his powers in a car that really, really suited him down to the ground. And, you know, I got to give Nico mad respect, actually, for that 2016 season. Because, yes, you could argue that Hamilton was not having his best season. He wasn't. He was making mistakes. But you could also argue that the pressure on him caused by Nico Rosberg actually contributed to those mistakes. You could argue that because most of the season Hamilton was chasing Rosberg, and yeah, Hamilton's engine blew up at the Malaysian Grand Prix, but there were times during that season where Rosberg was a little bit unlucky as well, of course. So I think overall I've got to give him some more respect for that. I really, really do. I struggle to put the guy in the A category. Some people were like, oh, S tier minimum. No, I can't put him that high. I struggle to put him in the A category. I mean, it's the Andretti category at the moment, isn't it? It's the only guy in there, of course. I struggle to justify putting him that high. I do think, though, that B is probably about right. You know, I do put him on those guys' kinds of level. I think, you know, if you were to compare him to some of these guys, like, I would put him probably above Button, around Hill, probably, you know, around Hunt, people like that. You know, I'd probably say around there. So I think B category is probably about right for him personally. But again, I'm sure I'm going to get some people shouting British bias in the comments and all this and that. But, you know, get your opinions down there. I want to hear what you have to say, even if it's a lot of rubbish. Anyway, the last guy, and this is going to cause controversy, I'm sure. Lando Norris, without a doubt, is deserving to be at least a 5-time champion. He's in the S tier. No, it's not. I'm only joking. Let's put him back. Oh, no, not going to put him in the D category. Let's just put him down here just for now. I can't put him back into the real thing at the bottom there because it's gone now because he's the last image. But he's not staying in the D category. I'll tell you that much. But yeah, Lando, of course, the most recent 1-time champion, and it's hard to judge him because we don't know what he's going to do for the rest of his career. He's still young. He's what, 26? You know, he could have another 10 years in Formula 1 comfortably. No problem. 15 years these days with the longevity of these guys in Formula 1. We don't know what he's going to be like for the rest of his career. Now, if you were to judge him just off of this season, you could definitely argue, yeah, he was a bit lucky because Max Verstappen didn't have that much of a competitive car for most of the campaign. He was only 2 points off him in the end, although, of course, Lando Norris disqualified from Las Vegas because of a fault from the McLaren, you know, the skid blocks running down too much. He was also on that terrible strategy in Qatar. If it wasn't for that, he would have been world champion by a much bigger margin. You could definitely argue he was still lucky, though, in a sense, because of, Verstappen being the driver of the season. You know, I got no doubt about that. So, you know, there is that. But I do have to give him kudos for the way he recovered from that accident at the Canadian Grand Prix. You know, he said that he saw a psychologist. He saw someone to try and improve his attitude when it came to this stuff. So I do think he does deserve some kudos for that. And with his efforts so far in Formula 1, he's probably deserving to be in the C category. So I'm going to put him in there. Now, that's with an asterisk. That's subject to change. Next year, McLaren could give him the best car in the grid again, and he could dominate the World Championship. I don't think that's going to happen, because I think Oscar Piastri is going to improve next year too, but Lando Norris could as well. So I feel like it is really, really early in his career to judge him. He's just completed his 7th season in Formula 1. He's going to be competing in his 8th season next year. He's got a long way still to go in his career. So that could move, depending on how he does in the rest of his career. That could easily move. If he's never competitive again and doesn't challenge for a world championship, then he's going to move down to the D category, I would think. But if he gets close to winning more world championships, he might well move up to B. Of course, if he wins another championship, he's not on this list anyway, because he's a 2-time champion. So it's very much subject to change. I am sitting on the fence. It's nice and comfy up here. I got a cushion. And I've been recording for a long time doing this. I've enjoyed doing this so much, guys. I hope you've enjoyed watching it. Get your thoughts on my grades in the comments below. Like I said, edit should have improved from last time. I've been recording for ages. It's been such a long one. 50 minutes I've been recording for. It's going to go down to about 40 probably, I would guess, in the edit. See how accurate or inaccurate that is when I actually post the video. But guys, I hope you're having a fantastic time this holiday season. Have a very Merry Christmas. I will do my best. I will endeavour to go and do my grades for 2025 as well. That's the next big one. So yeah, see you